Why do people quit? What if the thing you think is stopping you is revealing you? Think about the last time you were absolutely committed to getting something done. Getting healthy, building a business, saving money, repairing a relationship, changing your life. At the beginning, you were fired up. You had the plan, you could see the outcome, you were ready. But then something happened. The scale stopped moving. The money got tight. Someone said no. The relationship, well, it got complicated. The opportunity, it just disappeared. The excitement, that wore off. You failed, you got tired, you started questioning yourself, you questioned everything. And then suddenly, the question wasn't, how bad do I want this? The question became, what am I going to do now? Welcome to the Out Hustle Mentality Podcast, where insight meets impact and we break down the principles, patterns, and systems that help us compete where competition matters most, within ourselves. I'm your host, Joe Olivas, and in today's episode, we're going to go deep into one of the foundational principles of the Out Hustle Mentality philosophy. And once you fully understand it, this will change everything in the world around you. Principle number 6 of the Out Hustle Mentality philosophy states your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. Now, life is funny sometimes because we see people talk about commitment everywhere until commitment costs something. Well, in today, I'm going to talk to you about a college student whose idea received an unimpressive grade who went on to eventually build a company that transformed an entire industry. We're going to talk about one of the greatest athletes who ever lived who suddenly couldn't safely perform movements that she executed thousands of times before. And we're going to talk about an undrafted quarterback who struggled in a very big way to reach his dream, who would eventually find himself standing on football's biggest stage. Three people, three completely different arenas, three completely different forms of resistance. But underneath their stories, the exact same pattern. And once you see that pattern, once you recognize it, you're going to see that everywhere in your health, in your relationships, your finances, your career, your faith, and your goals, and maybe in the very thing that you're struggling with right now. Because there's a moment that comes between who you are and who you're trying to become. Most people, they misunderstand that moment entirely. Some run from it, some quit because of it, some spend their entire lives trying to avoid it. But today, we're going to learn how to use it and leverage it. Now, before we go any further, we need to define commitment because commitment isn't how badly you say that you want something. And commitment, that isn't excitement. And commitment certainly isn't motivation. And commitment isn't intensity either. Commitment is your willingness to continue choosing behaviors aligned with the outcome when those behaviors become inconvenient. That is commitment. And that's the out hustle mentality. Anybody can make the declaration. Eventually, life demands demonstration. And that's where our story begins. Everybody loves the outcome, the transformed body, the successful business, the financial freedom, the strong marriage, the promotion, the confidence, accomplishments, the legacy. That's what goes on every vision board. But you know what nobody puts on that vision board? Rejection, failure, boredom, uncertainty, exhaustion, disappointment. Nobody cuts out a picture that says, I hope my plan completely falls apart. But here's the problem. Personal growth creates friction because growth requires your current identity to behave differently than it behaved yesterday. Different habits, different decisions, different standards, different priorities, different responses. And eventually, something pushes back. Your old habits, they push back. Other people push back. Circumstances push. And sometimes you push back. And when that happens, we make dangerous assumptions. We assume something must be wrong. Maybe, but not necessarily, because difficulty isn't always evidence that you've left the path. Sometimes difficulty is part of the path. And so here's where I introduce you to Frederick Smith. Long before Federal Express became FedEx, before the thousands of trucks, before the massive sorting facilities, before hundreds of aircraft were moving packages around the world, there was an idea. Frederick had attended Yale University during the 1960s, and while there, he wrote a paper dealing with the logistical challenges of transporting urgent, time sensitive shipments. Smith saw something. The existing transportation system It wasn't optimized around the kind of rapid, dependable delivery that he imagined. He envisioned something different: a dedicated aircraft, a centralized sorting system, packages flowing through a central hub and rapidly back out towards their destination. Now, according to FedEx's own history, the paper Smith wrote while at Yale received an average grade. Now, here's where motivational storytelling sometimes gets a little sloppy. You've heard stories and versions where the professor supposedly told Smith that the idea was impossible. That's not what we need to claim, because the verified story is more useful. You see, because someone else's evaluation of an idea does not have to become the final evaluation of the vision. Think about that. How many ideas die because somebody else isn't immediately understanding them? Someone questions you, someone laughs, someone says, I don't know about that. And suddenly their belief becomes your belief. Well, Smith didn't do that. After Yale, he served as an officer in the United States Marine Corps, including service in Vietnam. Years later, he returned to the idea. In 1971, Smith founded Federal Express. Then on April 17th of 73, Federal Express officially began operations in Memphis, Tennessee. 14 aircraft, 25 cities, and on its first night, 186 packages. That's it. Now, imagine standing there looking at the beginning of what would eventually become FedEx, and the total number of packages out the door was 186. Now, the vision was enormous. The visible evidence, anything but. And that's where most people struggle and quit, because we don't just want progress. We want somebody to tell us, yes, keep going. We want the numbers, we want the applause, we want the validation, but the long term vision often requires you to continue before the visual validation ever arrives. Smith's story isn't primarily about sacrifice, it's about something deeper. External evaluation doesn't have to determine internal commitment, because sometimes you have to keep building while the world around you is busy trying to figure out what you're even doing in the first place. A lot of people don't really lose commitment when resistance arrives. They lose the feeling that created the commitment in the first place. At the beginning, they're motivated, excited, inspired. Then resistance shows up and the emotion changes. Now they're frustrated, tired, discouraged. Well, that's because the feeling changed, and they assume the decision should change as well. But commitment isn't a feeling. Commitment is what remains after the feeling fades. That's why so many people quit. They thought motivation was the engine, and it wasn't. Motivation started the movement. Commitment is what carries it, even when it's only 186 packages on day one. Now, because I love recognizing greatness and it's most obvious in athletes, let's go from packages flying through the sky to Tokyo 2021, the Olympics. Simone Biles. She arrived as one of the most accomplished gymnasts in history. The expectations, they were astronomical. And then something happened. During the team final, Biles attempted a vault, but something was wrong. She lost her sense of where she was in the air. Gymnasts, they call that the twisties. For most of us, that's difficult to comprehend. So imagine you're launching yourself and your body through the air, flipping, twisting, rotating, and suddenly your brain can't reliably tell you where the ground is. That's scary. For an elite gymnast performing extraordinary difficult skills, that's outright dangerous. So Biles, well, she withdrew from several events. And wouldn't you know it, everyone had an opinion. Some supported her, some criticized her, some questioned whether her competitive dominance was over. Well, she eventually returned for the balance beam and won bronze. But her larger comeback, well, that took some time. She stepped away, she reassessed, she addressed what needed addressing. And then in 2023, Biles returns to elite gymnastics. And in Paris 2024, 3 years after Tokyo, she won 4 Olympic medals, 3 of them gold. Now, here's what I want you to notice: her commitment wasn't demonstrated by blindly continuing. That's important, because sometimes we misunderstand commitment. We think commitment means keep doing exactly what you're doing no matter what happens. No, that's not always commitment. Sometimes that's just being stubborn. Biles gives us a more mature definition. Commitment to the outcome doesn't require blind loyalty to the strategy. Another reason people quit is because they misunderstand what difficulty means. They think, if this were really meant for me, it wouldn't be this hard. So resistance becomes evidence. The workout hurts, wrong plan. The business struggles, wrong idea. The relationship gets difficult, wrong person. The goal takes longer than expected, wrong direction. But meaningful goals almost always create friction. Sometimes resistance doesn't mean turn around. Sometimes commitment says keep going. Sometimes recover. Sometimes it's reassess. Sometimes it's get help. Sometimes change the plan. Sometimes it's start again. You come back and then you win four more, three of them gold. Because if every obstacle automatically meant stop, you'll eventually quit anything difficult enough to matter. The question isn't, did I stubbornly stick to my original strategy? The question is, did my response move me closer to the person and outcome I'm committed to? Now, hold on to that thought because we're going to need that later on. Okay, again, principle number 6, your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. Because where we're going next, well, remembering that principle is going to be important to understand. Now imagine chasing one of your dreams your entire life, professional football. Kurt Warner played quarterback in Northern Iowa, but he didn't become the full-time starter until his senior season. For him, after he was finished at Iowa, the NFL draft came, and it went. Nobody drafted him. Eventually, the Green Bay Packers brought him into their training camp. Now think about that quarterback room. Brett Favre, Mark Brunell, Ty Detmer, and Kurt Warner. Well, Warner gets released. And then comes the part of his story that is almost unreal. The guy who believed he could become an NFL quarterback ended up stocking shelves overnight at a grocery store in Iowa for roughly $5.50 an hour. Think about that for a minute. The dream? NFL quarterback. His reality? Grocery store stocker. Now, if you're Warner, what does that mean? Does that mean you're not good enough? Does that mean the dream is over? Does it mean that you were wrong all along? For Warner, he kept playing. Arena football, NFL Europe, more reps, more experience, more development. Eventually, the St. Louis Rams, they signed him. But even then, he wasn't immediately handed the entire franchise. He spent the 98 season as a backup. Then in 99, Trent Green was supposed to be the starting quarterback. And during the preseason, Green suffered a season-ending knee injury. And suddenly, the opportunity Warner had been preparing for had arrived. Now listen carefully. The opportunity didn't make Kurt Warner ready. His commitment before the opportunity made him ready. When it arrived, Warner took over. 41 touchdown passes, MVP. The Rams went to win Super Bowl 34. As an undrafted quarterback, grocery store stocker, the arena football player, he was the Super Bowl MVP. So here's the question. During all those years when it looked like nothing was happening, was nothing happening? Of course not. He was accumulating something. He was getting his reps in, more knowledge, experience, failures, correction, confidence, preparation. Up until that impressive season, the world couldn't see it. And that need may be one of the most dangerous reasons people quit. The need for immediate visual validation. People can tolerate hard work if they believe that it's working. The real commitment test happens when the work appears to be moving forward and nothing is changing. You're eating better, but the scale isn't moving. You're building the business, but revenue isn't growing fast enough. You're saving money, but the bank account still looks small. You're putting content out, but nobody seems to care. Eventually, the mind starts asking, what's the point? Is this even worth it? And that's when people quit. They stop doing the very things that they may have been accumulating beneath the surface. Commitment means being able to continue the correct behavior before the result gives you the emotional permission to continue. Because sometimes the validation is delayed. And if you require immediate evidence to stay committed, you'll quit before the evidence has even had time to arrive. Now think about this. Smith, Biles, Warner, three people, completely different. Different worlds, different obstacles, but here's something happening in all three stories. Something appears between the person and the outcome. Smith experiences external doubt and limited early validation. Biles experiences internal obstacle that can't safely be ignored. And Warner experiences years where the visible results say the dream isn't happening. And then something gets exposed. Not just skill, not just talent, something deeper. Commitment. Smith had to decide whether other people's evaluation determined his vision. Biles had to decide whether commitment meant protecting the outcome or protecting her ego. And Warner had to decide whether he'd continue preparing without any guarantee that the opportunity was even coming. Different resistance, same question. How committed are you now? Principle number 6, out hustle mentality philosophy. Your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. And that brings us to the first major idea I want you to remember from today's episode. There's something resistance does that comfort cannot. You can say you're disciplined when nothing is tempting you. You can say you're confident when everybody believes in you. You can say that you're committed when you're winning the game. But then resistance arrives, and suddenly we discover something. Resistance doesn't just challenge your commitment. Resistance reveals your commitment. That's the resistance revelation. Resistance exposes the difference between what we say matters and what our behavior demonstrates actually matter. Now, let's see how this hits you. You say your health matters, then you're tired. What happened? You say financial freedom matters, then something went on sale. What happened? You say your relationships matter, then your ego gets hurt. What happened? You say business matters, then nobody notices your hard work. What happens? Resistance separates intention from commitment. Anybody can make the declaration, I'm doing an Ironman. Resistance demands the demonstration. Where are the workouts? But here's where things get interesting, because once resistance reveals where you are, you have a decision to make. Two people can go through very similar circumstances and respond completely different. Why is that? Part of the answer is meaning. Something happens, and almost immediately we tell ourselves what it means. The business isn't growing, so it must be failing. The scale didn't move, so this diet isn't working. Someone rejected me, so I'm not good enough. The mistake happened, so I blew up my opportunity. The plan changed, so everything is falling apart. Notice something? The event happened, but then we added the interpretation, and the interpretation influences our response. If I believe this proves I can't do it, then I'll respond that way. If I believe this showed me something that I need to improve, I'll respond differently. Same event, different meaning, different response. And that brings us to the second major idea. Once resistance arrives and commitment is revealed, you have an opportunity. You can deliberately examine the meaning you've assigned to what happened, and you can learn from it. That's the resistance reframe. A deliberate shift in the perspective that allows us to interpret resistance in a way that produces productive response rather than an automatic retreat. But listen carefully. Reframing is not pretending. You're not pretending failure didn't happen. You're not pretending something doesn't hurt, and you're not pretending the strategy isn't working when all the data says that it isn't. You're asking, what else could this truthfully mean? Now, that's a key word here, truthfully, because the purpose of the resistance reframe isn't to make yourself feel better. It's not meant to stroke your ego or tickle your ears either. The purpose of the resistance reframe is to help you choose a better, more meaningful, and productive response. That's the difference between reframing and motivational denial. And this is where we begin changing the language here. When resistance says pain, consider this. It's not pain, it's process. Maybe the discomfort is part of the developing the capacity the outcome requires. When resistance says punishment, consider this. It's not punishment, it's preparation. Maybe there's something this season can develop within you. When resistance says sacrifice, consider this. It's not sacrifice, it's selection. You're not merely giving something up, you're choosing what matters more. When resistance says pressure, consider this. It's not pressure, it's proof. Pressure may be exposing exactly where your mindset still needs strengthening. When resistance says stalled, consider this. It's not stalled, it's stacking. Maybe the win hasn't happened yet, but the work is accumulating. And when resistance says setback, consider this. It's not a setback, it's a setup, but only if you do something useful with the information. And that's an important distinction here. The words alone accomplish absolutely nothing. You can say it's not stalled, it's stacking, but if every morning you're repeating the strategy that's clearly failing, you're not reframing, you're rationalizing, which means we need another layer. The resistance reframe test. Before you accept whatever reframe you choose for the resistance that you're currently going through, run it through these 4 questions first. Is it true? Am I acknowledging reality or am I pretending the problem doesn't exist? Is it useful? Does this interpretation help me respond constructively or does it merely make me feel better? Is it aligned? Does this response move me towards my desired identity and outcome? Is it actionable? Can I identify something that I can do next? True, useful, aligned, actionable. If your reframe doesn't survive those 4 questions, change the reframe. Commitment doesn't mean blindly continuing. Sometimes the most committed response is change. Dale Carnegie once wrote, "Develop success from failures. Discouragement and failure are 2 of the surest stepping stones to success." Carnegie became one of the foundational voices in the modern personal development world. His work focused on confidence, communication, leadership, human behavior, and practical self improvement. His book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936, became one of the most influential personal development books ever written. But listen again to the beginning of that quote: develop success from failures. Now, he didn't say failure is success. He says develop something from it. Failure is raw material. The question becomes, what are you going to build with it? That's the resistance reframe. Your response determines whether the information becomes useful to you. The committed don't simply get back up when they fall, they get back up informed. Now let's bring this into your life because this isn't about Frederick Smith, it's not about Simone Biles, and it's not about Kurt Warner either. This is about you. And resistance shows up differently across 5 arenas: mental, physical, social, financial, and spiritual. Mentally, pressure exposes things that comfort can hide. You're confident until somebody criticizes you. You're disciplined until you're exhausted. You don't care what people think until people start talking about you. So it's not pressure, it's proof. Pressure may expose insecurity, fear, lack of preparation, need for approval. Good. Now you know. Don't condemn yourself. Study yourself. Ask, what did this pressure expose that I need to strengthen? And then strengthen it. That's the action that you will take. Physically, someone says, I'm sacrificing everything I enjoy because I want to get healthy. But are you? Maybe you're selecting. You're selecting how you want to feel tomorrow or for what you want to taste for 10 minutes tonight. The workout over the hour in bed, the water over another energy drink, sleep over another late night, consistency over convenience. So it's not sacrifice, it's selection. Sacrifice focuses on what you're losing. Selection focuses on what you're choosing. So ask, what choice would the healthier version of me make next? Then make it today, not next Monday. Socially, relationships expose us. Conflict, rejection, disappointment, misunderstanding. Maybe someone failed you. Maybe you failed them. Instead of only asking, whose fault was this? Ask, what did this interaction teach me? So maybe you need better boundaries. Maybe you need to listen. Maybe you need to apologize more. Maybe you're avoiding difficult conversations. Maybe you're continually seeking approval from people who don't share your values. So it's not a setback, it's a setup. But if you only use what happened, ask, what did this teach me about how I need to communicate? Choose, forgive, apologize, then act accordingly. That's what you do next. Financially, progress is often painfully unimpressive. In the beginning, you save that first $50, then $100. You eliminate one debt payment, one avoided purchase, one month following the budget, and then you stop. You look back and you think to yourself, that's it? Well, it's not stalled, it's stacking. You're stacking capital, knowledge, discipline, earning better habits, ability, and perhaps you're most importantly, you're stacking evidence that you can trust yourself with money. Ask, what is the next small financial action that I can add to the stack today? Then do it. Transfer the money. make the payment, cancel the expense, send the proposal, learn the skill, put another one on the stack. Now, spiritually, there are seasons when life simply doesn't make any sense. The door closes, the answer doesn't come, the plan, it falls apart, and you ask why. Well, be careful about immediately interpreting difficulty as punishment. Instead, ask, what can this season of life help me develop within me? Patience, humility, compassion, wisdom, faith, gratitude. See, it's not punishment, it's preparation. Not because every hardship was intentionally sent to teach you something, but because regardless of why the hardship arrived, you can still decide what you develop through it. Ask, what quality can I intentionally develop during this season, even if I don't understand the reason behind it? Then practice it. Because sometimes preparation isn't preparing for something that you're going to receive. Sometimes it's preparing you for someone you're supposed to become. Now, Psalms 27:14 gives us the most natural connection to both communication and personal growth. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. We normally measure progress by what's changing around us. The opportunity came, the money increased, the relationship improved, but Psalm 27 introduces another measurement. What's becoming stronger within you while you're waiting? Because sometimes you can look stalled on the outside while something is being strengthened within you on the inside. And that's when resistance arrives. Maybe the question isn't only, when will this end? Maybe it's, who am I becoming while I wait? Principle number 6 of the out hustle mentality philosophy. Your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. So, for you to reach your desired outcome, you need to do more than simply understand this. I need you to use it. So, wherever you're listening to or watching, I need you to think about one arena in your life where you're currently experiencing resistance. Choose one, not five, choose one. Got it? Now, we're going to walk through this together. This is where insight becomes action. This is where we stop letting resistance happen to us and we start using it for us. This is the system. This is what turns a moment of frustration into a moment of transformation. I call it the R4 protocol. 4 simple, powerful steps: recognize, reveal, reframe, respond. So let's do this together. Step 1. Let's recognize. Ask yourself, what resistance has arrived? Meaning, what am I struggling with right now? Don't exaggerate it and don't minimize it either. Name it. Maybe I'm working out and not seeing the results. Good. That's the resistance. Recognize it for what it is. Step 2, the reveal. Now ask yourself, what does this reveal about my commitment? Meaning, what's behind the resistance that I've been dealing with? Maybe I'm discovering that I only feel committed when I can see immediate progress. Don't judge yourself, study yourself. That's information. That's good. That's your resistance revelation. Reveal the truth about where you are. Step 3, the reframe. Ask yourself, what is another truthful and useful way to interpret this? Meaning, how can I refine and redefine this to my advantage? Maybe it's not stalled, it's stacking. I've only been doing this for 3 weeks. Consistency is accumulation. So that's your resistance reframe. But we're not finished. Reframe the meaning to serve your mission. Step 4, that's the respond. Ask yourself, what action proves the reframe? Meaning, what can I do now to take advantage of what I've just learned? This is where the entire philosophy becomes behavior. Maybe the answer is complete today's workout. Then do it, because if you say it's not stalled, it's stacking, and then you quit, you didn't reframe anything. You just changed the vocabulary, and that didn't do anything. Recognize, reveal, reframe, respond. And there's a powerful point underneath all 5. Recognize what you're experiencing. Don't run from the resistance. Name it, reveal it, what your reaction is telling you. Don't judge yourself, study yourself, reframe the meaning that you've assigned to it. Don't deny reality. Find a more useful truth. Respond with behavior aligned to who you're trying to become. Do something about it. That's what makes the R4 protocol different from positive thinking. Recognizing without revealing means you see the problem, but just don't care to learn from it. And revealing without refraining means you don't care, to understand yourself, but would rather remain stuck in the same interpretation. And reframing without responding is just motivational language. And that's just silly. But when all four happen together, resistance becomes information. Information changes perspective. Perspective changes behavior, and behavior changes the outcome. And that brings you right back to the foundational principle. Principle number 6 of the out hustle mentality philosophy. Your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. Now, we've moved from motivational phrases to practical behavior. That's the difference. That's the power of the R4 protocol. And I'm going to show you how this connects to the identity performance framework that we've discussed in previous episodes. Vision creates belief. Belief establishes identity. Identity defines behavior. Behavior commands performance. Performance yields results. Results build your legacy. But there's a critical moment between identity and behavior. You know who you want to become. You believe you're capable of becoming that person. And then resistance arrives. And resistance asks, are you going to behave like that person now? That's where the R4 protocol lives. The identity performance framework, well, that explains how you produce the results. The R4 protocol helps you keep moving when something threatens the process. It protects the bridge between your identity and your behavior because your identity isn't proven by what you say. Eventually, identity requires behavioral evidence. Principle number 6, again, of the out hustle mentality philosophy. Your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. So here's the entire framework. Remember it and use it in your own life. Resistance will arrive. Something will challenge the expected path. Commitment, it's revealed. Your response exposes the current condition of your commitment. Perspective is reframed. You choose a truthful, useful, aligned, actionable interpretation. And finally, response is chosen. You take the next behavior that proves the reframe. That's personal growth. That's not pretending resistance doesn't exist. Learn how to respond to it differently so your true commitment can move you forward to the outcome that you desire. And there's one final distinction. Commitment isn't intensity. Intensity is how hard you can go. Commitment is how consistently you can choose the right response when things get hard and your commitment is tested. Understand that. That's why resistance matters. Resistance separates intention from commitment. Anybody can make the declaration. Resistance demands the demonstration. What you achieve is a direct result of the level of commitment you have, not the level of commitment that you pretend to have. Which brings us all the way back to today's foundational principle once again. Your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. Eventually it's coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe it's already here. The scale won't move. The call won't come. Someone will say no. You'll get tired. You'll make a mistake. Someone will disappoint you. You'll disappoint yourself. And when that happens, remember, resistance arrives. Don't be surprised by it. Recognize it. Commitment is revealed. What did your reaction expose? Study it. Perspective is reframed. What could this truthfully mean? Run it through the test. Is it true? Is it useful? Is it aligned? Is it actionable? Then your response is chosen. Do something about it. Because the R4 protocol isn't about making yourself feel better about what happened. It's about helping yourself choose a better response to what happened. It's not pain, it's process. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's not sacrifice, it's selection. It's not pressure, it's proof. It's not stall, it's stacking. It's not a setback, it's a setup. Frederick Smith reminds us that other people's evaluation doesn't have to determine our commitment. Simone Biles reminds us that commitment to the outcome sometimes requires changing the strategy. Kurt Warner reminds us that the scoreboard doesn't always reflect what we're stacking behind the scenes. Dale Carnegie reminds us that failure can become raw material if we're willing to develop something from it. And Psalms 27 reminds us that we can become stronger while we are waiting. Because resistance is inevitable. Surrender isn't. Commitment should not be conditional. Keep building your vision, keep raising your standard, keep making the selection, keep putting another one on the stack, and build a life where your legacy isn't determined by what you wished for, but by who you chose to become when resistance arrives. Now, before we wrap up, make sure to subscribe, because we're going to go and keep breaking down the principles and systems and behaviors behind the out hustle mentality philosophy. And more importantly, how to apply them when life gets real. Because here's what I want you to remember from today. Your goal isn't going to test your commitment. The resistance between you and that goal will. Anybody can be committed when they're excited. Anybody can believe when they're winning. Anybody can keep going when the world keeps rewarding them. But eventually, something pushes back. And when it does, that's your moment. Not necessarily the moment you work harder, not your moment to pretend everything is fine, but your moment to pay attention. What is this resistance revealing about me? What does it require me to change? How can I reframe what I am experiencing? And most importantly, what does the person I'm trying to become do next? That's the question, because you don't build your identity when you talk about who you want to become. You build it in the next decision, the workout you compete when nobody's watching, the money that you don't spend, the conversations you finally have, the boundaries you finally establish, the mistake you finally own, the strategy you're willing to change, the promise you to yourself that you decide to keep. Those moments, they seem small, but they're not. They're votes. Votes for your identity, votes for your future, vote for the person that you're becoming, and eventually those votes become the legacy. Don't spend your life wishing for less resistance. Become someone who knows what to do with it. Let it reveal you. Let it teach you. Reframe it, then respond to it, and then put another one on the stack. Because your level of commitment is directly tied to your outcome. And your legacy will be built from the thousands of moments when life gave you an opportunity to become less, to settle, to give up, quit, and you choose to become more. I'm your host, Joe Olivas. This is the Out Hustle Mentality Podcast. So remember, you're competing every single minute of every day. Not with them, with you. Win that competition, win the next decision, and keep becoming someone your future can depend on. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the hustle. Catch you on the next episode.